try not to start with okay, and everyone's laughing at me. So we're gonna start with a song called, I think it's just called Freshman. And Mom is gonna sing this awesome song she wrote, a parody to Mama Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys, right?
Yeah.
And it's about not being a freshman, and when she wrote about a freshman in high school, and I'll let her explain that. But this song is so true, it's almost painfully funny.
So yeah, I used to teach freshman health all day long, and it was great and inspired some great things in me, and one of them was this song. So I basically stole the tune from Willie Nelson. Sorry, Willie, but if you hear it, I think you'll like it. But it's a lot of truth on teaching health, yeah. So what it's like to be around high school students. So this also applies to all the kids in our youth group and the kids that I still teach, although I teach more than health. And Darren, you got a freshman next year, so right? So this is for you, okay? All right.
Hold on tight.
Yeah, hold on tight. This is not your kid, though. I'm just saying. I was teaching at Riverton, so just keep that in mind. Okay. Sorry about that, you guys from Riverton. Okay. Freshmen aren't easy to love. They're harder to teach. Well, their hormones are raging. Sometimes they are not within reach. And they think it's their job every day to break the dress code. They consider it wise to wear flip-flops and 40 below. So mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be freshmen. Don't let them walk around school thinking they're cool. Don't let the girls flirt, don't let the boys drool. Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be freshmen. 'Cause they'll be in my class and they'll have to learn well. 'Cause if they do not, they will all go to the principal's office. Well, freshmen aren't easy to watch, don't leave them alone. 'Cause they'll be texting some kind of love note on their cell phone. You let them, they will watch garbage from dusk until dusk. As if they needed more fuel for all of that lust. So mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be freshmen. Oh, make them bigger, turn off that TV. 'Cause I have to teach them, have mercy on me. Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be freshmen. 'Cause if they get hauled down with that MIP, surely they'll wish they had listened to me. All right, this next verse. Freshmen aren't easy to love, they're harder to teach. Unless, of course, you are a senior, it might be in your reach. 'Cause freshmen don't think that it's wise to date those their own age. So the seniors kick back and just wait for the freshman parade. So mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be freshmen. Have a shotgun on hand when you meet every day. Help me try to reduce the teen pregnancy rate. Mamas, don't let your
of my soul. And I don't actually know the story behind it, so we'll just sing it.
Jennifer Irvin and I wrote this song way back.
Nice.
And I probably this time of year, I don't know when we were wishing that it was summer, but here we are in the winter. So I don't know, but maybe I was thinking about the ocean. I don't remember. I'll have to call Jennifer. Maybe she remembers. All right.
I was captain of this vessel one day not so long ago. I went sailing on my journey, without in places I would go. But each port in which I ventured did not mean within my hopes. Till I met the captain, I found what I needed most. Sail on, captain, captain of my soul. I don't know where you are leading, but I give you full control. To any destination where you lead me, I will go. Sail on, captain, captain of my soul. It wasn't until I hit the storm that I realized I was lost. Though I thought I knew it all, I was turned and tossed on a sea of confusion. I was drowning in my sin. That's when I turned this vessel to the one who owns the wave. Sail on, captain, captain of my soul. I don't know where you are leading, but I give you full control. To any destination where you lead me, I will go. Sail on, captain, captain of my soul. When the sea is cold, I know that I am free. And when the storms arise, I still rest in peace. 'Cause the captain built this vessel, and he knows just what I need. And every day it's an adventure as we sail these open seas. Sail on, captain, captain of my soul. I don't know where you are leading, but I give you full control. To any destination, captain, I don't need to know. Sail on, captain, captain of my soul. Sail on, captain, captain of my soul. Sail on, captain, captain of my soul. It was funny when we were in Nashville, we were going to record this song. Dad was in the car and he started singing it, and he was singing, "Sail on, Captain, Captain of my soul." And then we all started singing it, and Mom was like, "Knock it off, she's gonna sing it like that in the studio now." It was funny. I just,
Sounds like that, no, doesn't it?
that's what I think of when I hear the song now.
Sail on.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're gonna sing "If We Don't Sing," which is another song Mom wrote. We're
Yeah. Yeah, so this song is just thinking about, I'm a really outdoor person. I love nature because it's such a great creation of God. And I was just thinking one day how awesome creation was and how much it just speaks to the intelligent design of God. And so I don't write praise songs all the time. I usually write songs about stories or exhortation or things. But this one is definitely a praise song. It's called "We Don't Sing." Very soon a day is coming when everything on knee shall bow, confess that Jesus is the Savior. How about we do it now? 'Cause if we don't sing, song at the end for you, so we'll come back. Okay. So we got clear through Joshua, kind of in a recap, and then we are on to Judges, which is one of the most interesting books in the Bible, I think. It's pretty cool. And so we left Joshua. He's a great leader, and as long as he was leading, the people behaved themselves because he was a strong leader. And when Joshua was alive, there was peace and success. And there were Canaanites still in the land practicing adultery, but with Joshua, they kept pushing them back. And the conquered land was then divided between all the tribes of Israel. And Caleb, it says, gave an inheritance to his daughter. So the Bible is, people are constantly condemning Christians for not having women where they were supposed to be. But many times in the Bible, inheritances go to women, and things happen for women that never happened in the other cultures. So it's interesting because the Bible actually affirms the position of women. Caleb gave his daughter a big inheritance with two different springs and everything. And he was a pretty important guy, so he said, hey, if somebody would go conquer the people next to them that just kept bothering them and moving in on them, he said, if somebody would take some men and go conquer that area, I will give that man my daughter as his hand in marriage. And so this guy by the name of Othniel, did I say that right? I got to remember. He went and conquered, and so he got to marry Caleb's daughter. Caleb is, of course, the friend of Joshua, who were the two original spies that went into the land. Were some of the only two people, except for the kids, who got to actually go into the new land. So this guy, Othniel, as he's called, was one of the judges also. So during that time, while they're all spread out, they had the judges, and the judges would rise up when they needed to gather and start behaving themselves and get back from slavery. So the cycle was kind of like this. The people would get mixed with the Canaanites and start worshiping other gods. And remember, the Canaanites were very bad. They even practiced human sacrifice. So they would get mixed with them, then they get conquered. Then the judges would rise up and say, hey, people, and they would repent, turn back to God, then they would push them back, and then until that judge lived, there would be peace, and then as soon as that judge died, they'd start all over. And it's a sad cycle that happened. But if you look back to what Joshua said to them, choose this day who you will serve. Are you going to serve these other gods, or are you going to serve God? Because if you don't, they're going to be a snare to you. They're going to be a whip in your back and a thorn in your eye. Choose this day who you will serve, and that's where we get the phrase, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That was Joshua who said that. So Joshua also brought out before he died that God will always keep his promises. And that's really true. And God said, if you don't follow me, I'm going to turn you over to these other people. But if you do, I will protect you. And remember the covenant. I covenant with you to be the people of God because I have the promise coming, and the promise coming was Christ. So he covenanted with them. And so all these judges are trying to remind them of their covenant. And not all the judges are perfect. And later on, like next week, we're going to talk about Samson. Samson was absolutely not a perfect judge. And we're going to talk about where the people were caught in this mess. Now, we should always be kind to everybody, but obviously the lesson that we learn from this is that you will start to emulate the people you hang out with the most. So we can say, if you can't win them, join them. That's what usually happens. If you are hanging around people that are doing things you don't want to be doing, it's really hard not to, because eventually you will usually follow them rather than them following you. That's usually what happens. That's what happened here with the Canaanites. I remember hearing when I was a kid growing up that people said, first you will abhor it, then you will tolerate it, and then you will embrace it. So something that originally is abhorring to you, you'd be like, no, I'm not going to do that. But after you hang around it enough, you tolerate it, and then eventually You embrace it. And this is actually studied in research. It's called desensitization. And it's been researched and proven that you will begin to get desensitized to the thing that you're around. Even if you at one time were really, shocked, and then pretty soon you're like, oh yeah, this is cool, whatever. Hollywood is really bad at this, and Hollywood has a definite agenda if you follow it at all. It has an agenda of what it's trying to tell people is okay. And they are definitely putting out a message over and over. It's interesting, I know Kyle and I, my son and I were talking about this. The biggest movies that make the most money are like your PG-friendly family movies. They are the biggest money makers. But it doesn't matter to Hollywood because they just have their own agenda. They'll put out movies that don't make any money just to sell their agenda. It's interesting. So they don't really, I think sometimes they think they care about money, but really sometimes, depending on the company, they have a real agenda. An example of this is the city of Pompeii. Now, I'm teaching my kids at school about the Roman Empire, and it's very interesting. I mean, the Roman Empire is totally interesting. Of course, that's when Jesus came to the earth. There was a lot going on, the Colosseum, all those things. But there's a city in the Roman Empire that was covered by the hot gas and lava from Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. So this was after Jesus was born and died. This city was covered with hot ash. And nobody knew it was there. Some people digging, I can't remember what they were digging for, they accidentally found a marble floor and started peeling back Pompeii and found Pompeii and all the things they were doing. Found the people's bodies were preserved. They were turned to stone because the ash filled where their body was, but they were preserved how they fell, how they were trying to breathe, and it's pretty sad. But once they started studying the city, they found it to be a very beautiful city. But the first archaeologists that found it were shocked because it had shocking things, like it had its own little Colosseum. It wasn't called the Colosseum. It had its own little arena of death, had its own gladiators, had its own brothels, had its own, pornography everywhere was very common all the way through it. So the first people that saw Pompeii were like, oh my goodness, no wonder it got covered by a volcano. It was a very evil, evil city. And then recently, though, if you see anything about it, people are like, oh, we can't judge them because we just don't understand the way they live. We can't judge their lifestyle. But here's what's interesting about that. These people practice human trafficking. In the Roman Empire, most people were slaves. In fact, it was said that one time somebody in the upper class said, hey, we should all make the slaves dress in different clothing than we have so that we'll know who's who. And somebody else told them, no, you shouldn't do that because then the slaves will know that there's more of them than there are of us, and we don't want that to happen. So that's how many slaves there were in the Roman Empire. So most of these people are slaves. You can certainly guess that these women of the brothel were slaves, that the gladiators were usually always slaves. Very rarely were they not slaves. And they died for the entertainment of the people of Pompeii. So there were terrible things happening, and it's interesting that today's society will go, yeah, we don't want to judge them for their raunchy graphic material because we just don't understand how they live. And I just saw a recent documentary on this where the guy was like, it was Christianity that made this stuff not cool. And I was like, did you just say that? And he's like, yeah, it was Christianity that made this not cool. And I was thinking, wow, you don't realize what you just said. So you're saying human trafficking is okay, pornography, everything's okay, including watching people die. That's okay. And it was the Christians who said it wasn't okay. Yeah, it was the Christians who said it wasn't okay. In fact, the arena, the Colosseum, was actually stopped by a priest, a monk, who later on, they were still practicing these events in the arena even after Christianity was legalized. And this monk, crawled into the Colosseum and he just said, stop, because these two gladiators were fighting. And the gladiators all stopped, and the people of Rome stoned the guy to death. But word got around, and pretty soon it was outlawed to have the arena, to have fighting to the death. That was outlawed because of the Christians. And human sacrifice was outlawed because of the Christians. And human trafficking was outlawed because of the Christians. And so I think it's interesting how our society today judges Christians so harshly, blames us for, oh yeah, we can't, this is not cool because the Christians said it wasn't cool. Well, praise God for the Christians. The Christians also stopped slavery, and the Christians spend more money around the world for Christian charity, feeding people, clothing people, than anybody else in the world. Christians do that. Christians stopped a potential revolution in England that would have been just like the French Revolution. But there was this group called the Methodists that started with John Wesley that went around feeding people, clothing people, taking care of orphans. There was a guy in England who basically fed 18,000 orphans over his life. And so England did not need to have a revolution in the same way that the French Revolution occurred. So some powerful people. William Wilberforce was only 24 years old when he got into Parliament, spent his whole life till he was in his 70s trying to end slavery because of Christianity, because he was also a Methodist. Interesting, some things that happened because of Christians. But today's society, everything's okay except for Christianity. I mean, if you go to school, you can talk about anything except being a Christian. It's pretty sad. And so I think that's really changing our society, and we have to be very aware that we teach our kids the right thing, the truth of the Bible, because the truth of the Bible is getting lost. And just like these people of Israel, we are one generation away from a disaster. So here's what happened. Caleb and Joshua and these guys died, and then the people that were left didn't know. They weren't there for the Red Sea. They weren't there for all the big events. They were the generation after. So they didn't know what God had done. They didn't know what happened. And even though, they always tried to set up these memorial stones, like this rock is going to be a witness to you that said you are going to serve the one true God. And obviously the rock doesn't speak. But the reason that Joshua did that is like, this stone will remind us so that we can tell our children that we serve the one true God and we don't serve idols. And this is a testimony that we have to tell our children about all that God has done for us. And we have to know that he keeps his promises, but he'll also keep his promises to let us go to evil if we don't serve him, because we made a covenant. So it's interesting that each generation that comes down, we have to teach our children, because we're one generation from no Christianity. For example, England, we were just talking about England with the Methodists who did amazing things, went out and just fed the poor and took care of the orphans and did all these things, spread the gospel around the world, made it really cool to be nice and to give to charity. It was the English people who did this. The English people sent missionaries all over the world. Did you know that in England now only like 7% of the people go to church or profess Christianity? Like 7%. That's much less than America. So in one or two generations, those people forgot that they sent all the missionaries they did all the cool stuff. They made chivalry popular. They're the ones who did that. So just in a generation, we can lose that. And when Casey and I were over there for our music trip, we're there and there's Darwin's face is on a 10-pound bill. A 10-pound bill is almost $20 over there. I don't know what it is right now, but it was about 16 to 18 bucks when we were there. And there's Darwin's face. So Darwin, who was a racist, Darwin, who couldn't even prove his own theory, Darwin is the hero over in England now, and God is not there. I feel like sometime we ought to all go back over there and say, hey, let's talk about Jesus. Remember, you sent all your missionaries everywhere. Where are you now? So anyway, we have to remember that we are responsible to teach the next generation. And so that's what happened in this place, in the Judges. These people would serve God for a while, and then they'd forget. They always wanted God to be faithful. But then they weren't so good with their responsibility on their part of the deal, their part of the promise. And so some guys rose up, and the first one was Othniel, and he kept people from idols, and he tore down the gods, and the main gods were Baal and Ashtoreth. So Baal is the main god, and Ashtoreth is like this goddess, the counterpart, and they practiced every kind of evil ritual that you can imagine with Ashtoreth, and they had Ashtoreth poles, and so he went around tearing all that stuff down. But then when he was dead, we're back again to people forgetting. So here's what the choice that the Hebrews have, and we have similar choices. They have to choose between God and idols. And here's what's the comparison. I got this from the Chronological Life Application Study Bible. It's really cool. Anyway, if they serve God, they get the long-range benefits. But sometimes you have to wait for those. But if they serve idols, they get the short-term benefits. They get to self-gratification and everything like that. Whereas if you go with God, you got to delay gratification. You got to follow morality, and you're required to do that. Whereas if you choose the idols, sensuality is encouraged, every kind of evil. It's okay. Everything's okay if you go with false gods, which this is very comparable to our society. So even though we don't necessarily worship a little Baal or an Ashtoreth pole, we have gods that we serve in this country for sure, besides the one true God. If you choose to follow God, the Hebrews had to have high ethics. But if you followed idols, you could have very low ethics. There was no standards. If you choose to follow God, your neighbors won't like you very much during that time in Canaan. Same with today. A lot of Christians have very politically incorrect views right now. And so sometimes we have to be careful what we say when it might upset somebody, that we said something from the Bible. And for crying out loud, if we have the 10 Commandments hanging somewhere, somebody might get ticked off at us. I mean, that's where we're at. So believing in Christ and in God, we don't condone the sin around us, whereas if you just forget about that, you can mix with your neighbors, everybody likes you, it's not a problem. For Christians and for the Hebrews, they serve a God they could not see. And these idol worshippers, they had a very tangible idol. And in America, we serve a God we cannot see, but we can see the evidence of him everywhere. But some people like things a little more tangible, like money and things they can get their hands on, instant gratification, things that they can have now. And then God encourages us to be unselfish and to serve other people. And these idols are very selfish, and they get you in by your own selfish ambitions. And so for these Hebrews, they had a lack of business. They couldn't trade too much with other people because they had to keep themselves pure. But if you were absorbing their whole culture and all their gods, then business was good for you. You didn't have to keep yourself pure. And I'm not saying that we have to isolate ourselves. That is not what God wants for us. He wants us to be out there reaching people and teaching the truth. But we have to not compromise at the same time. So, when we follow God, we have discipline. We practice discipline, standards, self-control. But when we follow false gods, whatever they are, we compromise everything. We compromise all the things we know to be true and right. And God requires us to have a life change, and evil requires nothing except for you to have a good time. So, of course, it's easier. And again, God teaches us to value people, and other idols don't. It's all about you. It's all about what you want. Our society is definitely all about what you want, all about number one, right? That's the biggest lie of all about number one. Another judge rose up, and then I'll save some, but just some short little stories that are interesting before we get to some of the bigger judges. This guy's name was Ehud, and he was the second judge, and he raised an army. And what happened is that he went to visit this king. He had to pay tribute. His Moabite king named Eglin. And he went to visit King Eglin, and King Eglin was a big, heavy man. And he gave him his tribute, because now they're slaves, because they're being evil. And he walked out past the idols. And when he went past the idols, something in him turned and said, no, I am not paying my tribute to a king who's an idol worshiper. And he went back into the chamber, and he said, hey, king, I got a secret to tell you. It's a secret information. And since he'd already paid his tribute, the king just didn't suspect him, but he had a big knife right under his thigh, right here. And so the king leaned in. First he goes, everyone needs to leave the room. And so this guy leaned in. He said, you know what? And then he took out his gun, or not his gun, his knife, and he stabbed it inside the guy. And the guy was so heavy he couldn't see it. It was in his folds. And then he snuck out through the bathroom. There was some kind of bathroom facilities, probably like a hole. So he went out the sewage system to get out of there. And then he went out and raised an army. And for the longest time, nobody would get in and get this king because they're like, well, he's in private session, or maybe he's in the bathroom. That's how the Bible even says that. Maybe he's in the bathroom. We better leave him alone. So they finally break in and find him dead. But by then, this guy has an army. And so for a while, when this guy was in charge, people like tore down Baal and took down the Asherah poles and took down the high places. They all like to go to these high places. Because even people that don't believe in the God, they know that when they're up in nature in the high places, it's like the closest they can get to God. But then that's where they put up their idols. And today it's comparable to the people who worship nature. Instead of going, wow, look at what amazing creation God made, they actually worship the creation, which cannot hear, cannot listen, cannot help you, is just something God made for us to enjoy, right? So it's very similar. These people would all go up to these high places and build these things. And so he had to go tear them all down. And then we have this cool story about this. There was a prophetess. Well, she was married to a prophet. Her name was Deborah. And Deborah helped to judge when they bring all these cases. This is another way they got their name, judges. They would help talk through the cases. And one time Deborah got this vision, we got to go conquer these people. And her husband's like, I'm not going to go unless you go with me. She's like, well, I'm a woman. If you don't go by yourself, then a woman's going to get credit for this war that we're about to win. He said, okay, let's go. So she actually went out, and she's the only woman judge. And they took care of these people. And there was this king that got away. His name was King Cicero. And he got away. He ran. He got off his chariot and he ran for cover. And he went to a tent of a guy that he knew. And his wife showed up and she said to him, well, why don't you hide in my tent? But the word about these people got around. And then when the Hebrews were serving God, they were very powerful. And word got around. So this story will never be told in children's Sunday school class. But this lady, and her name is Jael, I don't know how you say it, but Jael, she waited till he was asleep and then drove a spike through his head and then called for everybody, hey, we got the king, we got him. So these two battles were actually taken care of by a couple of women, which is interesting. So like I said, the story of Judges is very, very interesting, but the lesson is clear for us, and that is, we are one generation from not worshiping the one true God. And we're already there. I mean, we already have people that think the environment can control itself and doesn't need our help. You know, when God made us the gardener. We already have people right now that value animals more than people, human life. We already have people in this generation that don't value human life. Unborn, afterborn, whatever, as long as if you're not contributing to society, you're not important, you can kill yourself, which God would never say. And so we live in a generation that's moving farther and farther from God. And if we want our kids to follow God, we have to teach them the truth. And honestly, that's why I wanted to do this class. I wanted to talk through the Bible because I was fortunate enough to have a dad that liked the Old Testament, so the Bible always made sense to me. I was like, I get why Jesus died. He had to die because we needed the sacrifice for the sin. Well, most people, you say, well, Jesus had to die for our sin, and most people today are like, what sin? What are you talking about? There's no such thing as sin. I've heard this. There's no such thing as sin, just a lack of love. Really? Really? Have you looked into the life of a serial killer, say, for example? What do you call that? A lack of love? You know, I mean, some of the things happening, human trafficking, is that just a lack of love? Really? Are you kidding me? I mean, we're kidding ourselves to think there's no evil, no wrong things in the world. And we're kidding ourselves to think that if we don't teach our kids right from wrong, that they won't follow. They're going to follow Hollywood, because Hollywood is definitely working to get them. So if you don't want your kids to believe what they're told in Hollywood, then you got to do your job. You got to teach somebody else. And we're all surrounded by people that were raised with these things being right or wrong. We have to be careful that we don't judge them because not everybody grew up with the biblical background that I have. And I know that. And I have to remember, if these people don't know the truth, it's because they don't know. And we got to tell them. It's really important. We don't hate them or diss on them. We tell them. We tell them because we love them and want them to know the truth just like we do. And then when it comes to things like our society is really struggling with drugs, struggling with alcohol, worshiping sex, all these things. How is anybody going to know the difference if we don't tell them that Jesus is the answer and he fulfills us? And we have to do it now. Because if we don't, we'll lose this next generation. And that worries me. Because America was the greatest country in the world and still is. But how long will that be? How long will we be the greatest country in the world when we forget about God? When our nation was formed, one nation under God, based on Christian principles. What will happen when we forget that? Where will we be? The Bible, Christianity is spreading so much faster in Africa than it ever is spreading here right now. Because people are like, I don't need God, because I got everything. Because I don't need God, because there is no God, because we got Darwin, and we got science, and I mean, we're really getting stupid. We're getting really stupid. I mean, there are actually people who think everything that we have could come from nothing. No energy, no intelligent mind. That is just ridiculous. DNA is so complex. How can that come by itself? It's ridiculous, but everyone's starting to believe that. That we all just came from accidental nothing, which is impossible. So just with this, I'll have the band come back up and do a song that really we need to bring the truth and we need to bring the fire for the people and let them see that what God offers us, what Jesus offers us is a covenant, really similar to what the Hebrews had, only different. The Hebrews had to do sacrifices of animals for their sins because Jesus hadn't come yet. And they had to have the perfect lamb to atone for their sins. And they had to keep themselves from other people because they had to keep themselves pure. And they didn't have the Holy Spirit and they didn't have Jesus yet. But we have Jesus, and our covenant is with Jesus. And we can covenant with him, not to get what we can from him, but to transform to his image. And honestly, it's not about us. It's about Jesus. And there's nothing more fulfilling than conforming to the creator of the universe and letting him be what he wants through us. Letting him be what we were created to be, which is awesome. So let's sing this song. Let me get my guitar. Let the fire fall. I guess this one came from when I was thinking that what purifies gold and what purifies things is fire. We become pure when we let God take over and control us and shine through us and work through us and take away our junk and empty ourselves out to be something better. It just goes like this. Purify my heart, oh God, make me clean and new. Empty me from anything that does not honor you. And I have known your work, I've seen the power of your name. Bring it down on me, Lord, bring it down on this land. Let the fire fall. Let the fire fall. Fire fall. Down on me, let it take my all. Let the fire fall. Let the fire fall. Let the fire fall. Bring it down on me, let it take my all. Let the fire fall. There be no distractions that would cause for me to stray. And I want no resistance to be getting in my way. And with everything I am, Lord, I just want to be like you. And I am only asking what I know you want to do. Let the fire fall. Fire fall. Down on me, let it take my all. Let the fire fall. Let the fire fall. Fire fall. Down on me, let it take my all. Let the fire fall. Bring it down on me, take my all. Let the fire fall. So Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time to draw closer to you, to learn more about your word. Help us to be teachers of the truth. Help us to win people to the truth, that you want so much to love everybody. You want so much to bring them the covenant that you offer to us, that you offered to Israel. And we embrace that covenant to serve you, to bring light to the world, not for our sakes, but for people and for you.